Hey y'all, it is Umel from UmelGaming here, and I am back with another Monster Hunter video. Man, has it been a long time since I said that line. Before I get into the meat and potatoes of this video, I just wanted to give a quick disclaimer on where I've been during this last hiatus. To keep a long story short, I got really busy with my day job, and about half a year after my last video uploaded, I went and I got promoted, which meant that I got even busier. And another year went by. I eventually quit that job because I valued my sanity more than my work. I'm not going to go into too much detail on that, but essentially I've been job hunting for about the last 4 months or so. But it's gotten to the point where I figured, if I am at home because I don't have a job right now, I might as well pick up my hobby again. So you're going to be seeing more of me. But I'll get more into my plans later on into the video. That's not what you're all here for. I just figured I would start with a little disclaimer. If you want to hear about my plans for the future, stick till the end of the video. Otherwise, let's get into the video itself. So, Monster Hunter Stories 2, Wings of Ruin. Not a traditional Monster Hunter game in the traditional sense, but it's a Monster Hunter game that I've been looking forward to ever since it was announced because I'm a big JRPG fan and turn-based combat fan in general. My two favorite games of all time are Chrono Trigger and Final Fantasy VI. So, giving me a turn-based Monster Hunter game, I'm all for that. But ever since this game was announced, and heck, in some cases back with the first game, there's been a couple of misconceptions that have basically been following this game. Specifically, I am talking about Stories 2, but one of these misconceptions does apply to Stories 1 as well. And these misconceptions have been following this game pretty badly. Like, it's as bad as Naviru following my writer around asking for donuts bad. Like, it's... So, in this video, I just wanted to come up and clear up these two misconceptions. I just wanted to talk about them a bit. So let's get into the first misconception here. The first of these two misconceptions is that Red, the grandfather of the Stories 2 protagonist, happens to be the playable character from Monster Hunter Stories 1. I just want to come out and say this out front. Red is not the Stories 1 protagonist. The Stories 1's protagonist is named Lute. So besides the obvious name difference of one being named Lute and the other one being named Red, there's a few other pieces of evidence to kind of prove that they aren't the same person. Firstly, of some of the characters that are going to be in Stories 2, there are a few returning characters, and 3 of them are human, just like Lute was. And these returning characters are Evinia, Lilia, and Roberto. They're all human characters, like I said, just like Red, and most of them have barely aged at all. The ones that are kind of like most obvious are Lilia and Evinia, who were about the same age as Lute in Stories 1, and now they appear to be about 4 to 5 years older, but then again, they might not even be older at all, considering the fact that there's a slight change in art style I'll touch on later in the video. And like Roberto, he doesn't look different at all, but the point is, all 3 of them, they're human. So if this was the Stories 1 character all over again, you would have expected them to have aged as well. And then the final piece of evidence is the different Rathalos' appearance. So, the partner of the Stories 1 protagonist, the Ratha of that game, has a single scar over one eye, whereas Guardian Ratha, the partner of Red in Stories 2, has an X-shaped scar pattern on its forehead that doesn't cover up either eye. So, these all kind of point to these are not the same people. I just want to quickly touch on, why did this misconception occur in the first place if it's quite obvious that the two are not the same person? Well, to be honest, part of the fault lies with Capcom, can't deny that, but looking into the situation of where this misconception started, I think a solid portion of it actually lies in Nintendo's hands here. But I'm not 100% sure, so like I said, I did look into it, but I haven't been able to find the videos or anything that specifically stated it, but this is kind of the general consensus, is that it was mostly Nintendo. But let's start with the Capcom portion here. So where does Capcom's share of the blame come in all this? Simply put, because they cannot make up any original names for any Rathalos or Rathian, for that matter, in the Stories series. With the inclusion of Raisewing Ratha, that we're going to be getting in the full game that we know we're getting because of the trailers. We're going to be on 3 different Rathaloses in across 2 games that all have been named Ratha. Not to mention the one Rathian that's been named Rathi. Capcom cannot come up with any original names for these Rathaloses. They're pretty much asking for people to get this wrong. So, Capcom here, they've basically engineered a situation that's easy to make people get mistaken. Easy to get wrong. 3 Rathalos, all named Ratha. Where does Nintendo's share of the blame come in? I have looked into this. I have researched where the general consensus of where this misconception started and where it took off. And the general consensus seems to be that it was from a Nintendo Direct / a Treehouse Direct. For those of you who don't know, Nintendo has different directs throughout the year showcasing various pieces of content of what's going to be upcoming for their systems, and obviously with Stories 2 being a Monster Hunter, which is a big franchise, especially in Japan, they're going to want to say like, oh, we got this new Monster Hunter game coming out in July, and it's like our summer game. Monster Hunter Stories 2, it was having a pretty big portion in their various directs. And I'm not 100% sure if it was that they mistaked Guardian Ratha from Stories 2 as the Ratha from Stories 1, or if they just outright said that Red was the Stories 1 protagonist. I'm not quite sure, but from what I understand is that they're the ones that originally got the information wrong in a public setting. Essentially, what it boils down to is that Capcom made it really easy to get the information wrong, and Nintendo got the information wrong in a public setting, and as far as I could tell in my research, they've never addressed it neither company has addressed this mistake, and if they have, it's so buried deep in the internet at this point that it's going to be hard to find. You get the false misconception in your head, and you're going to have a hard time proving it wrong until you actually play the game and it actually clicks into you that, Red and Lute are not the same person. But that's the first misconception. So what about the second? Well, the second misconception is less so about Stories 2 and more so about Monster Hunter Stories IP in general. And that is that Monster Hunter Stories is a game for children. Let me correct that statement for anyone who has this opinion. Monster Hunter Stories is a game meant to appeal to children, but honestly ends up targeting a completely different demographic. So, looking at Stories as a franchise, I can only see 3 things that make it appealing to children. And the third, you can only see it if you're squinting really hard. So let's break them down and start go into each thing in general, and let's just talk about each of these individual things first, about why you could get this idea. So the first reason why you could say that Monster Hunter Stories is a children's game is the art style, which is a more stylized, cartoonish graphics compared to the more realistic approach they take in the mainline series. Yes, the stylized look is more appealing to younger audience, and that is what Capcom was going for actually when they originally made the first Stories game. Like I said at the top of the statement here, that it was a game that was meant to appeal to children, but they didn't really do that. And with the art style, they actually took a couple steps back with Stories 2 after they realized that the majority of their players were adults. Stories 1 had a very chibi-esque, cute chibi-esque appearance with the characters and everything, whereas Stories 2 is just more of a traditional anime-styled game. So they actually dialed it back slightly. They still want to appeal to that audience if they pick up the game and play, but they realize that the audience that they actually develop for Stories isn't so much for children as it is more the adult audience. They still do want the younger audience to play Stories too, but when you look at the other aspects of Stories, as such as the depth of the gameplay or the actual narrative of the game, you'll quickly come to realize that the ones that will really come to appreciate the game are not the children, but the adults. But I'll talk more about this later. The second reason people probably think that it's a children's game is Naviru, the mascot feline, who accompanies both characters of both games. Now, whether it's his goofy appearance, his obsession for donuts, or his corny one-liners, Naviru seems like he's ripped straight from a children's cartoon. But here's the thing. Once you look past his surface-level profile, you'll come to see that Naviru is far from the idea as being meant for kids. I mean, his backstory is pretty dark. No spoilers here because he's going to be a main character in Stories 2, so I won't be surprised at all if they touch on his backstory in this game. And so if this is your first Stories game, I don't want to spoil it. But let's just say that he has a very dark backstory. It ain't happy-go-lucky. And when you play through the game, you'll come to realize that his corny one-liners and his general attitude is less to make him a cartoon character and more to make him a comic relief character meant to help dissolve the tense situations. Because yes, Stories 1 has tense situations, and I assume Stories 2 will have plenty of them as well. So finally, as for the third reason that you could say that Stories was a children's game, that the one that you'd really have to squint for to get it to work for your argument, is that Monster Hunter Stories is a monster collection turn-based RPG just like Pokemon. This comparison comes up a lot, but just because two games are part of the same genre doesn't mean that it is for the same audience. A good example of this is Call of Duty Warzone versus Cuisine Royale. Both of these are Battle Royale games, but one is more serious while the other is just batshit crazy. Another example closer to home is that the mainline Monster Hunter games is like Dark Souls, because both games are action RPGs, but the narratives, gameplay loops, themes, and aesthetics of both games are completely different from one another. And although you can have overlap of players, just because you play one game doesn't mean you'll enjoy the other, right? Just going and saying, oh, they're the same genre and Pokemon's meant for kids, so Monster Hunter Stories has to be meant for kids, is a very, very shallow argument. So I touched on this earlier, but I just want to talk about this and explain why, when you delve in deeper into Stories 2, or Stories in general, that the depth of the gameplay and its narrative, you'll come to find that neither are meant for kids. Now, I won't go too deeply into gameplay here, as I do intend to make future videos talking about the gameplay of Stories 2 in the upcoming weeks, both leading up to its release as well as during its release window, since it's only about a week and a half. Actually, just like a week and 2 days or so from launch, so I won't really talk about gameplay here, but let's talk about the narrative. So there's some slight spoilers for the first game, but in the tutorial portion of the game, which is essentially what the equivalence of our demo is for Stories 2, the mother of your best friend, who becomes your rival character in that game, gets killed by a Nargacuga, and it's what sets him down the path to become your rival. A young child watching his mother die at the hands of a wild creature during a cutscene during the tutorial portion of the game. Yeah, that sounds like it's meant for children. This is only one example of the Stories 1 narrative, and I think the Stories 2 is probably going to be very similar in this front. So anyone who looks at the narrative and is like, yeah, that's meant for kids, they don't know what they're talking about. Anyway, I hope that this video has helped clear up these two misconceptions. There are other misconceptions that all follow the game, but generally people have misconceptions over anything. I just want to touch these two because they've been following, like, the whole Stories is meant for kids has been following it since Stories 1, and then the whole Red is Lute has been following it ever since the first reveal trailer of Stories 2. So I just wanted to touch on these two because, you know, I'm going to start covering the content, and I just wanted to get it out of the way, clear out these two misconceptions before I start making other videos on the content. Anyway, I hope this has cleared up these two misconceptions for anyone who is watching this video. If you made it to the end of this video, I'd first like to say thank you. And if you could leave a like, comment, subscribe, all the things, you know how it is here on YouTube, it is all appreciated. But before you leave, I just want to quickly address my plans for the future content. Firstly, I do intend to live stream Stories 2 over on Twitch starting on its release day, unless something comes up. And if so, I'll leave a mention in my community tab. Secondly, I'll probably play the game even when I am not streaming, because I ain't a professional streamer. So I don't think I have the willpower to hold myself back from playing a game like this that I'm so excited for, and holding it to live streams. That being said, I do intend to record footage, even when I'm not live streaming, just so that you guys, just so that I have footage for when I plan to make videos, right? So, with that said, I do intend to kind of create a Let's Play series alongside it. So what I'll probably end up doing is I'll probably archive my VODs on YouTube, and then before I archive like the next VOD, I'll probably like splice in a few like Let's Play content videos in between all that, and then you'll get another live stream. It's going to be a little weird and all that, but you will get the whole chronological experience of my stories too. After that, I do also intend to cover news coverage of upcoming title updates and potential events for both Stories 2 and Monster Hunter Rise. So, you know, I will plan to cover the upcoming events and title updates for both games. Probably only be one video a week, probably when those events go live in Rise, because those are happening every week. So it makes sense to kind of like accumulate that stuff, right? Then I do also intend to do some guides for Monster Hunter Stories. I'm actually got an idea of what I plan to make on some guides here that are going to be talking about here. I kind of teased it earlier when I was talking about the depth of the gameplay in one of these reasons why it wasn't meant for kids. It has a very in-depth gameplay, right? I just wanted to like state that I do have plans to make some guide videos as well. So with all that said, don't expect like 3-4 videos a week. I don't really have the time between playing the games and enjoying myself and doing these videos. Expect 1, maybe 2 videos a week. That being said, it will ensure that these videos are of a higher quality because I'll actually have the time to edit and record these videos and come up with some good thumbnails and the like. So expect 1 video a week, 2 when I have a good guide going for you. Like I said, I'm not going to be like a professional YouTuber with like everything going for me. Anyway, that's enough about this. I'm rambling on. I've talked about the thing. I talked about my future plans. So I'm just going to be ending the video here. You'll see, definitely if you come over to Twitch, you'll see me streaming the game. And yeah, this has been Umel from UmelGaming. And remember, happy hunting.